Listen closely, my friends. You can spend your entire life chasing the feeling that you are finally going to be happy, only to discover that every time you reach what you wanted, your mind immediately creates something else to chase. A better body, more money, more success, more attention, a different life, a different version of yourself. And somehow, after getting closer to everything you thought would make you happy, you still feel that quiet emptiness when the noise disappears. Maybe the problem isn't that your life isn't enough. Maybe you've trained your mind to believe that you are never enough. The Stoics understood something most people spend years trying to discover. Happiness becomes fragile when you place it somewhere outside yourself. If your peace depends on what you own, what you achieve, how people see you, or whether life follows your plans, then your happiness is always one unexpected event away from disappearing. Marcus Aurelius had power, status, wealth, and responsibility, yet his philosophy repeatedly brought him back to the same battlefield, the mind itself. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when we stop demanding that the world obey our desires. You cannot control everything that happens around you, but you can train yourself not to become miserable because of it. And the most powerful part is that becoming happier with yourself doesn't require some enormous transformation. Sometimes it begins with something incredibly small: how you speak to yourself when you fail, whether you allow yourself to enjoy a quiet moment without needing stimulation, whether you compare your life to someone else's, whether you constantly chase the next achievement instead of experiencing the life already in your hands. These tiny behaviors seem insignificant, but repeated every day, they become the emotional environment you live inside. Your mind eventually lives in the atmosphere you repeatedly create for it. Think about a person carrying a heavy stone everywhere they go, then spending years searching for a better road because the journey feels painful. They change cities, careers, relationships, routines, goals, and still feel the same weight. Eventually they realize the road was never the only problem. They were carrying something they had never learned to put down. Many people live exactly like this. They keep changing their circumstances while carrying the same dissatisfaction, comparison, resentment, and self-rejection into every new chapter. So in this video, we're going to uncover 7 small but powerful habits that can help you become genuinely happier with yourself, not by pretending life is perfect, not by ignoring pain, and not by depending on other people to complete you, but by changing the way you experience your own mind and your own life. These habits will help you stop constantly fighting yourself, appreciate what is already present, create inner peace, and become comfortable in your own company. Because there is a difference between being alone and being at peace with yourself. There is a difference between wanting more from life and believing that what you have now has no value. There is a difference between improving yourself and secretly hating the person you are trying to improve. And until you understand that difference, you can keep achieving more while feeling less satisfied. The goal is not to stop growing. The goal is to stop believing you must become someone else before you are allowed to feel good about being you. So stay until the end, because these 7 habits may look small, but practiced consistently, they can completely change the relationship you have with the person you spend your entire life with, yourself. Habit 1. Stop arguing with reality. One of the quietest ways to destroy your own happiness is to spend your days mentally fighting things that have already happened. You replay the conversation, you rewrite the decision. You imagine how life would look if that person had stayed, if that opportunity had worked, if your past had been different, if your body looked different, if your circumstances had changed sooner. And while your body is standing in the present, your mind keeps living inside a reality that no longer exists. You cannot build peace in a room where your mind is constantly fighting ghosts. This is where Stoicism becomes brutally practical. Epictetus understood the difference between what is within our control and what is not. The past is not waiting for your permission to become different. Other people's choices are not yours to command. Reality does not negotiate because you are unhappy with it. But your response to reality is still yours. The moment you stop demanding that reality becomes something it isn't, you recover the energy you were wasting fighting it. Acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is the point where resistance ends and intelligent action begins. Imagine standing on the shore after a storm and shouting at the ocean because it destroyed something you loved. The ocean does not hear your anger. The waves do not reverse because you are devastated. You can spend the entire night screaming at the water, or you can look at what remains, gather the pieces, and decide what can be rebuilt. That is the difference between suffering and adding unnecessary suffering to your life. Pain may be unavoidable. The endless argument with reality is often optional. Marcus Aurelius faced circumstances that would have given most people endless reasons to complain. War surrounded him, people betrayed him, illness touched his world, responsibilities followed him constantly, and yet he repeatedly brought his attention back to the present task. He didn't need life to become gentle before he could become peaceful. He understood that his responsibility was not to redesign the universe according to his preferences. His responsibility was to govern his own mind within the universe he had been given. And this habit begins with a very simple question. Is this something I can change, or something I must learn to accept? Ask it when someone disappoints you. Ask it when an opportunity disappears. Ask it when you make a mistake. Ask it when your plans collapse. If the answer is that you can act, then act. If the answer is that you cannot change it, then stop spending your emotional energy demanding a different reality. This question can turn a chaotic mind into a disciplined one, but acceptance does not mean becoming passive. If you hate your current health, acceptance means acknowledging where you actually are instead of pretending everything is fine. Then you train. If your career is behind where you wanted it to be, accept the starting point and build from there. If someone has left your life, accept their decision without allowing their absence to decide the rest of yours. Acceptance looks at the truth without blinking, then asks what can still be done. There is also something psychological happening here. When you repeatedly ruminate over an unchangeable event, your attention keeps returning to the same emotional wound. The event may have happened once, but your mind can replay it hundreds of times. You experience the memory again, the anger again, the regret again, the humiliation again. You cannot change the original event, but you can repeatedly recreate its emotional presence inside your mind. You may not be able to stop the past from existing, but you can stop giving it unlimited access to your present. Think of your attention as a limited currency. Every minute spent mentally fighting yesterday is a minute you cannot invest in today. Every hour spent comparing your current life with an imaginary version of your life is an hour removed from the life actually available to you. This is why Stoic acceptance is not merely philosophical, it is practical. It protects your attention from being consumed by battles you cannot win. And there is a deeper freedom hidden inside this habit. When you stop requiring reality to make you happy, you become harder to emotionally destroy. You can experience disappointment without becoming bitterness. You can experience rejection without deciding that you are worthless. You can lose something without believing you have lost everything. Your happiness becomes less dependent on circumstances because your mind stops treating every unwanted event as a personal injustice. Tonight, Think about one thing you have been mentally arguing with for weeks, months, or even years. Maybe it is something someone did. Maybe it is something you regret. Maybe it is a part of yourself you keep wishing were different. Don't force yourself to love it. Don't pretend it didn't hurt. Simply tell yourself, this is what happened. This is where I am. Now what can I do with what remains? That question is powerful because it brings you back from the imaginary world of what should have happened into the only world where your actions actually matter. You cannot make peace by winning an argument with reality. You make peace by finally accepting what is, and then using what remains to build what comes next. Habit 2. Stop measuring your life against other people. One of the fastest ways to become unhappy with yourself is to constantly use someone else's life as the measuring stick for your own. You see their success, and suddenly your progress feels small. You see their appearance, and suddenly your own reflection feels inadequate. You see their relationship, their money, their lifestyle, their confidence, and without realizing it, you turn their highlight into evidence against yourself. Comparison doesn't simply show you what someone else has. It quietly teaches you to dislike what you already have. The Stoics understood that this was a dangerous way to live, because it places your emotional state in the hands of things you cannot control. Epictetus would ask you to look at what actually belongs to you: your choices, your judgments, your effort, your character. Someone else's possessions do not become your deficiency simply because they possess them. Someone else's success does not make your journey a failure. A mountain does not become smaller because another mountain is taller. Your task is not to defeat every mountain you see. It is to climb the one that belongs to you. Imagine two runners starting at different points on a massive landscape. One begins with better shoes, another begins with more training, another has a shorter path, another begins much later. If you spend your entire race looking sideways, you will eventually lose sight of your own direction. You will become exhausted trying to match a race you were never running. Your life works the same way. The moment you turn someone else's timeline into your deadline, peace begins to disappear. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world where status was constantly visible. He was surrounded by wealth, power, armies, politicians, and people competing for influence. Yet Stoic philosophy repeatedly redirected attention away from external rank and toward internal character. What mattered was not whether another person possessed more power, but whether he was governing himself with justice, courage, discipline, and reason. That distinction remains powerful today because modern comparison has simply become faster. The arena is now in your pocket, and you can compare yourself with thousands of people before breakfast. There is a psychological trap hidden inside this. Your mind is naturally sensitive to social information because humans evolved within groups where status and belonging could affect survival. But modern life can turn that ancient mechanism into an endless competition. You see someone else's best moment without seeing their private struggle. You see the result without seeing the years behind it. You see the body without seeing the habits that created it. You see the wealth without seeing the risks, sacrifices, failures, or circumstances behind it. You are comparing your entire life to a carefully selected fragment of someone else's, and comparison becomes even more destructive when you compare your present self with someone else's final result. You look at the person who has mastered something after 10 years and judge yourself because you are struggling during your first year. You look at someone who built a successful career and feel behind because you haven't found your direction yet. But progress has a rhythm. A seed does not become a tree because you become impatient with the soil. Growth cannot be rushed simply because someone else's tree is already visible. This doesn't mean you should stop admiring successful people. Admiration can become instruction. Envy can become information. If someone possesses a quality you genuinely respect, ask yourself what behavior produced it. Instead of saying, "I wish I had their life," ask, "What can their life teach me about the person I want to become?" That one shift transforms comparison from poison into education. And there is something even deeper. Sometimes you are not jealous of the person. You are grieving the version of yourself you believe you should have become by now. You see someone moving forward, and it reminds you of your own unfinished ambitions. That pain can be useful if you interpret it correctly. Don't use it as proof that you are worthless. Use it as a signal that something inside you still matters. The discomfort may not be saying, "You are behind." It may be saying, "There is still something you want to build." So create a private scoreboard. Measure yourself against your own previous behavior. Are you more disciplined than you were 6 months ago? Do you recover faster from failure? Do you speak to yourself with more respect? Do you keep more promises to yourself? Do you spend your attention more wisely? These are measurements that actually belong to you. Your greatest competition is not the person on your screen. It is the version of you that keeps asking for another year without changing anything. Tonight, when you catch yourself comparing, don't immediately force the thought away. Pause and ask, what exactly am I seeing that I want? Maybe it is confidence, maybe freedom, maybe discipline, maybe health, maybe financial stability. Identify the quality beneath the envy, then turn your attention toward the habit that could build it. Because happiness with yourself does not come from proving that you are better than everyone else. It comes from no longer needing someone else's life to become smaller before you can appreciate your own. You don't need their path. You need to become faithful to yours. Habit 3. Learn to enjoy your own company. There is a strange emptiness many people carry that becomes visible only when the room becomes quiet. The phone stops vibrating. The notifications disappear. Nobody is asking for anything. There is no music, no conversation, no screen demanding attention, and suddenly being alone feels uncomfortable. So they reach for something. They scroll, message someone, watch something, chase stimulation, or create unnecessary noise. But if you cannot sit peacefully with yourself for even a few minutes, you may not actually be afraid of loneliness. You may be afraid of meeting the person you have been avoiding. The Stoics treated solitude differently. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world filled with responsibility, conflict, political pressure, and human demands. Yet he repeatedly returned inward to examine his own judgments. He understood that the mind needs moments where it is not being pulled around by the outside world. This does not mean becoming isolated or rejecting people. It means becoming comfortable enough with yourself that your happiness does not collapse the moment nobody is entertaining you. A person who can enjoy his own company becomes much harder to control through loneliness. Think of a deep mountain lake. When the surface is constantly disturbed, you cannot see what lies beneath it. Every wind creates waves. Every movement creates distortion. But when the water becomes still, the depth becomes visible. Your mind is similar. Constant stimulation keeps you on the surface. Silence allows you to see what is actually happening underneath. What you fear, what you desire, what you regret, what you value, and what you have been pretending not to care about. Modern life makes this especially difficult because your attention can be occupied almost every second. You can wake up and immediately consume someone else's thoughts before hearing your own. You can eat while watching something, walk while listening to something, sit while scrolling, and sleep after consuming another 100 pieces of information. The brain rarely receives a clean moment to simply exist, and when silence finally arrives, it can feel almost threatening. But discomfort with silence is not proof that silence is bad. Sometimes it is evidence that your mind desperately needs it. There is also a deeper psychological reason this matters. When you constantly escape uncomfortable thoughts through stimulation, you never give yourself the opportunity to process them. You may temporarily feel better, but the underlying emotion remains. The unfinished conversation remains. The uncertainty remains. The insecurity remains. The regret remains. You haven't solved the problem. You have simply distracted yourself from noticing it. This is why learning to sit alone can become a form of emotional strength. You stop running from every uncomfortable thought and begin learning which thoughts deserve your attention. Epictetus taught that our judgments about events shape our experience of them. Solitude gives you a rare opportunity to observe those judgments without immediately reacting to them. You can notice, "I'm feeling rejected." Then ask, "What story am I attaching to that feeling?" You can notice, "I feel behind." Then ask, "Compared with whom?" You can notice, "I'm afraid of the future." Then ask, "What part of that future is actually within my control?" Self-awareness begins when you stop automatically believing every thought your mind produces. Try something simple. Take 10 minutes each day with no phone, no music, no television, and no conversation. Sit somewhere quiet and let your mind settle. Don't force yourself to meditate perfectly. Don't try to manufacture happiness. Simply observe. At first, you may feel restless. You may reach for your phone without even realizing it. That's exactly the point. You're discovering how dependent your attention has become on constant stimulation. With repetition, the silence becomes less threatening, and eventually, it can become one of the few places where you genuinely feel free. And then something beautiful happens. You begin discovering that happiness does not always need an event. A quiet morning can feel enough. Walking alone can feel enough. Drinking coffee while watching the world move can feel enough. Reading something meaningful can feel enough. Sitting with your own thoughts without needing to escape them can feel enough. You stop demanding that every moment entertain you before you allow yourself to enjoy it. This does not mean you should stop wanting relationships, friendship, love, achievement, or adventure. Human connection matters. The Stoics understood our social nature, but there is a difference between enjoying someone's presence and needing their presence to escape yourself. When you learn to enjoy your own company, relationships become choices rather than emotional life support. You can love someone deeply without being terrified of being alone. So tonight, don't immediately fill every empty moment. Let one moment remain empty. Sit with yourself. Listen to what your mind has been trying to say beneath all the noise. You may discover sadness. You may discover fear. You may discover ambition. You may even discover a version of yourself you haven't heard in years. Because happiness with yourself begins when your own presence stops feeling like something you need to escape. When you become comfortable in your own company, the world can become quieter without becoming emptier. Habit 4. Stop making happiness conditional. One of the most dangerous sentences you can teach your mind is, "I'll be happy when I get the money, when I lose the weight, when I find the right person, when my career works, when people finally respect me, when everything goes according to plan." It sounds harmless, but every time you repeat it, you move happiness into a future that does not exist yet. You turn the present into a waiting room and convince yourself that life will finally begin after one more achievement. And then you reach that achievement, experience the excitement for a moment, and your mind immediately creates another condition. This is where Stoicism becomes profoundly relevant. The Stoics never argued that you should stop improving your life. They argued that your peace should not be held hostage by outcomes you cannot completely control. Epictetus understood that desire becomes dangerous when you demand that reality obey your preferences. You can work toward wealth without believing wealth will complete you. You can pursue love without believing another person must rescue you from yourself. You can chase excellence without treating your current self as worthless. The goal is progress without turning the present into punishment. Imagine a man climbing a mountain who refuses to enjoy the view until he reaches the summit. He keeps walking, eyes fixed on the highest point, ignoring the sunrise behind him, the cold air, the landscape, and every step he has already survived. Eventually he reaches the summit and discovers that the satisfaction lasts only briefly because there is another mountain beyond it. The problem was never that he wanted to climb. The problem was that he had made himself incapable of enjoying the journey. There is a psychological pattern behind this. Human motivation often adapts to achievements. Something that once seemed extraordinary can quickly become normal after you obtain it. The new phone becomes ordinary. The new salary becomes ordinary. The compliment becomes forgotten. The achievement becomes yesterday's news. This doesn't mean achievement is meaningless. It means achievement alone cannot permanently stabilize your emotional state. If your happiness depends entirely on the next reward, your mind will constantly move the finish line. Marcus Aurelius had every external reason to believe that status could define a person. He was an emperor, yet Stoic philosophy repeatedly directed him away from status and toward character. Imagine possessing enormous power and still reminding yourself that what matters is how you think, act, and treat other people. That is a powerful lesson for modern life. You can pursue a better life without postponing your right to appreciate the life already in your hands. This habit becomes especially important when you are improving yourself. Self-improvement can quietly turn into self-rejection. You start working out because you hate your body. You study because you believe you're stupid. You build a career because you believe you're worthless without success. You become disciplined because you secretly despise your current identity. From the outside, it looks like ambition. Inside, it is war. And eventually, even if you achieve your goals, the voice that told you that you were not enough simply chooses a new target. Real growth sounds different. I respect myself enough to become better. Not, I must become better before I deserve respect. That distinction changes everything. When discipline comes from self-respect, failure becomes information instead of humiliation. A bad workout does not become proof that you're weak. A failed project does not become proof that you're worthless. A rejection does not become proof that you are unlovable. You can evaluate the result without turning the result into an identity. Try changing one sentence in your daily thinking. Instead of saying, I'll be happy when I achieve this, say, I will work toward this while learning to appreciate where I am. That does not lower your ambition. It protects your mind while you pursue it. You can want more without despising what you have. You can desire change without hating the present. You can be hungry for growth while still being grateful for the person who survived everything that brought you here. Think of a fire. A fire needs fuel to keep burning. But if you throw everything into it at once, you destroy the very thing you're trying to sustain. Your ambition needs the same balance. Goals give direction. Gratitude gives stability. Discipline gives movement. Acceptance gives peace. Remove one completely, and the system becomes fragile. A meaningful life is not built by choosing between ambition and contentment. It is built by learning how to hold both. So today, notice the conditions you have placed on your happiness. When I look better. When I make more money. When people understand me. When my life finally becomes easier. Question them. Ask yourself whether you are actually pursuing something meaningful or simply postponing your permission to feel alive. Because the future is never guaranteed to arrive in the exact form you imagine. And if you spend your entire life waiting for perfect conditions before allowing yourself to be happy, you may eventually discover that you were standing inside the life you once prayed for, but you were too busy waiting for the next one to notice. Improve your life. Chase meaningful goals, but don't postpone your peace until you reach them. Habit 5. Stop being at war with yourself. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix, because it comes from fighting yourself every day. You criticize your appearance, regret your decisions, replay your failures, question your worth, and compare your progress until even your own mind becomes a place you don't want to live in. You may look calm from the outside while carrying a private war inside. And the tragedy is that you can spend years trying to improve yourself while secretly treating yourself like an enemy. You cannot build a peaceful life with a mind that is constantly attacking the person living inside it. The Stoics understood that self-mastery was never supposed to mean self-hatred. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to return to reason, virtue, and the present task, rather than becoming consumed by judgment. The Stoic approach is not, everything I do is perfect. It is, I can acknowledge my mistakes without turning them into a verdict against my entire existence. That distinction is enormous. A disciplined person corrects himself. A destructive person condemns himself. One creates growth, the other creates shame. Think about a gardener who discovers that one section of his garden is dying. He doesn't stand over the plants screaming that they are worthless. He studies the soil. He looks at the sunlight. He checks the water. He removes what is damaging the roots and changes the conditions. Why? Because destruction does not produce growth. Your mind needs the same approach. When something in your life is not working, don't immediately say, I'm a failure. Ask, what is causing this, and what can I change? This is where the difference between guilt and shame becomes important. Guilt can say, I made a bad decision. Shame says, I am a bad person. Guilt can point toward correction. Shame attacks identity. If you fail at something, learn from the failure. If you hurt someone, take responsibility and repair what you can. If you wasted time, change the pattern. But don't turn one chapter into the definition of the entire book. A mistake is an event. It does not automatically become an identity. Modern psychology also gives us a reason to take our internal dialogue seriously. Repeated thoughts strengthen familiar mental pathways, and patterns of harsh self-criticism can reinforce negative emotional cycles. When every setback triggers the same internal attack, I'm useless, I'm behind, I'll never change, your mind begins responding automatically. But the reverse is also possible. You can practice a more accurate response. That didn't work. What did I learn? What will I do differently next time? This isn't fake positivity. It is disciplined thinking. Imagine two people making the exact same mistake. The first says, I always ruin everything. I knew I couldn't do this. I'm hopeless. The second says, I made a mistake. I need to understand why, correct it, and continue. The external event is identical, but internally, two completely different futures have been created. One person has turned failure into an identity. The other has turned it into information. Your response to your mistakes determines whether they become teachers or chains. Epictetus taught his students to examine their judgments rather than blindly obey them. That principle is incredibly powerful when dealing with yourself. When your mind says, I'm not good enough, don't immediately accept the statement as truth. Ask, based on what? When it says, everyone is ahead of me, ask, everyone. When it says, I'll never change, ask, what evidence proves that? You don't have to believe every thought simply because it appeared inside your own head. A thought can be loud without being true. And this does not mean becoming soft with yourself. In fact, genuine self-respect often requires greater honesty. If you're wasting your time, admit it. If you're avoiding responsibility, admit it. If you're behaving badly, correct it. If you're addicted to comfort, confront it. But confront yourself like a wise teacher, not like an executioner. A teacher says, you are capable of better, so let's change this. An executioner says, you are worthless, so why even try? One demands growth because it believes in your potential. The other destroys the very person who needs to grow. Start practicing one small rule. Never insult yourself for information you could use for improvement. If your body is unhealthy, create better habits. If your discipline is weak, train it. If your relationships are damaged, examine your behavior. If your confidence is low, build evidence through action. Don't spend your energy proving that you're terrible. Spend it becoming better. Because there is a powerful paradox here. The more you genuinely respect yourself, the less you need to constantly prove your worth. You can hear criticism without collapsing. You can accept failure without becoming ashamed. You can admit ignorance without feeling small. You can celebrate another person's success without feeling threatened. When your worth is no longer something you have to defend every hour, your mind becomes quieter. So tonight, pay attention to the way you speak to yourself when nobody else can hear you. That voice may be shaping your happiness more than your circumstances ever could. If you wouldn't speak to someone you love the way you speak to yourself, ask why you have accepted that voice as normal. You do not need to become perfect to be at peace with yourself. You need to become honest enough to correct yourself, humble enough to learn, and compassionate enough to continue. Stop treating yourself like someone you need to escape from. Become someone you are willing to live with. Habit 6. Create small moments of joy. Most people are waiting for a big reason to be happy. They think happiness will arrive with a major achievement, a perfect relationship, a new house, a better body, or some future version of life where everything finally feels right. But while they wait for the extraordinary, they overlook the ordinary moments that are quietly keeping them alive. A warm morning, a peaceful walk, a good conversation, sunlight through a window, the feeling of finishing something you promised yourself you would do. Your life is not only made of the moments you celebrate, it is made of thousands of moments you barely notice. The Stoics understood the value of appreciating what is already present. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to pay attention to the immediate moment rather than becoming consumed by what might happen later. This was not passive gratitude. It was a form of mental discipline. When your attention is always racing toward the next achievement, you become blind to the life happening underneath your feet. You keep asking, what comes next, while forgetting to experience what is happening now. A mind that cannot appreciate a small moment will eventually discover that even a big moment cannot satisfy it for long. Think of a person walking through a forest while staring at a distant mountain. The mountain is beautiful, but because he is obsessed with reaching it, he never notices the flowers beside the path, the wind moving through the trees, or the sunlight touching the ground. He reaches the mountain exhausted and realizes something painful. The entire journey was filled with things he could have enjoyed. Happiness often works the same way. You can spend years staring at the destination and accidentally miss the life that was happening on the way there. There is also a psychological reason. Small positive experiences matter. Your brain is constantly learning what deserves attention. When you deliberately notice something pleasant, meaningful, or rewarding, you reinforce your ability to detect those experiences instead of allowing your attention to be dominated entirely by problems. This does not mean pretending negative things don't exist. It means refusing to train your attention to become a machine that only searches for what is wrong. What you repeatedly notice becomes part of the emotional landscape you live inside. And this is where a small daily habit becomes powerful. Every day, deliberately create one moment that has no productivity requirement. Drink your tea without scrolling. Walk without checking your phone. Sit outside and feel the air. Read a few pages of something meaningful. Listen to music without doing 3 other things at the same time. Look at the sky before you rush back inside. These moments may appear insignificant, but they teach your mind something important. Life does not have to be productive every second to be valuable. Modern life constantly tries to turn every empty moment into consumption. Waiting becomes scrolling. Eating becomes watching. Walking becomes listening. Silence becomes notifications. Even rest can become another form of stimulation. Eventually, you can become so accustomed to constant input that simple life begins to feel boring. But boredom is not always a problem to eliminate. Sometimes it is the doorway through which your sensitivity to ordinary life returns. Seneca wrote about the importance of examining how we spend our time, because life is not simply measured by how many years we possess, but by how consciously we use them. Imagine realizing at the end of your life that you were present for thousands of sunsets, but experienced almost none of them because your mind was always somewhere else. You were sitting with people you loved while thinking about work. You were working while thinking about the weekend. You were resting while worrying about tomorrow. Your body was constantly present, but your attention was always absent. So create small rituals that bring you back. Morning sunlight, a short walk, a quiet meal, writing a few thoughts before bed, cleaning your space, making your favorite drink slowly instead of rushing through it. These aren't magical tricks. Their power comes from repetition. They create small points of stability inside an unpredictable life. And when difficult seasons arrive, those small moments become reminders that life is not only made of problems. But don't misunderstand this habit. You are not trying to manufacture happiness every hour. Some days will be painful. Some mornings will feel heavy. Some losses cannot be solved with gratitude. Stoicism never demanded that you pretend suffering doesn't hurt. The lesson is more mature. Feel what is real without allowing pain to convince you that nothing good remains. Because happiness with yourself is often less about finding one enormous reason to smile and more about becoming sensitive to the small reasons you previously walked past. One day you may realize that the life you were waiting to enjoy was never waiting somewhere ahead. It was hidden inside the ordinary moments you were too distracted to notice. Habit 7. Protect your mind from what steals your peace. You can be surrounded by everything you once wanted and still feel miserable if your mind has become a place where everything is allowed to enter. Every opinion, every criticism, every comparison, every notification, every argument, every person's judgment gets a room inside your head. You replay what someone said 3 days ago. You imagine what people think about you. You worry about situations that haven't happened. You consume bad news until the world feels dangerous, even when you're sitting safely in your room. Sometimes the problem is not that your life contains too much pain. It is that your mind has stopped having a filter. The Stoics understood that attention is one of the most valuable things a human being possesses. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to return his mind to what was actually in front of him, instead of allowing external chaos to dictate his inner state. He could not control rumors, political conflict, other people's behavior, or the future of an empire, but he could decide what deserved his judgment and what did not. That is a lesson modern life desperately needs. Not everything that reaches your eyes deserves to reach your heart. Imagine your mind as a house with an open front door. Anyone can walk in. A stranger enters and leaves an insult on the table. Another person brings jealousy and drops it in the bedroom. Social media brings comparison and fills the walls with photographs of lives that don't belong to you. News brings fear and leaves it sitting beside your bed. By night you wonder why you cannot feel peaceful. But the question is not only, why am I anxious? The deeper question is, who have I allowed to decorate my mind? This is where attention becomes a form of self-respect. Every piece of information you consume is asking your brain to spend something. Every argument you replay demands mental energy. Every comparison forces you to evaluate yourself against an artificial standard. Every unnecessary notification interrupts your attention and pulls you away from whatever you were doing. Your mind is not an infinite space. It has limits, and when you constantly fill it with noise, there is less room for reflection, gratitude, creativity, and genuine presence. There is also a psychological principle behind repeated exposure. What you repeatedly expose yourself to becomes familiar, and familiarity can shape what your brain expects and notices. If your daily environment is filled with outrage, comparison, negativity, and conflict, your attention can become increasingly tuned toward those signals. You may begin looking for threats even when none are present. But when you deliberately expose yourself to meaningful conversations, useful knowledge, nature, silence, exercise, reflection, and people who bring out your better qualities, you create a different mental environment. Your mind absorbs patterns from the world you repeatedly give it. This doesn't mean becoming ignorant of reality. Stoicism is not hiding from difficult information. Marcus Aurelius was responsible for an enormous empire. He could not simply ignore problems. The difference is that he tried to respond to what required action rather than emotionally consuming everything that demanded attention. There is a difference between being informed and being mentally possessed by information. You can know what is happening in the world without carrying the entire world inside your nervous system. And this habit becomes especially important when it comes to other people's opinions. Someone dislikes you. Someone misunderstands you. Someone criticizes you. Someone doesn't invite you. Someone thinks you're not good enough. You can spend hours trying to correct their perception, but you cannot control another person's mind. Epictetus would bring you back to the same battlefield, your judgments and actions. Ask yourself, is there something useful in this criticism? If there is, learn from it. If there isn't, let it pass. Think about a ship at sea. The ocean is constantly moving. Waves hit the hull. Wind changes direction. Storms appear without permission, but the captain doesn't scream at every wave. He studies the conditions, adjusts the sails, and keeps the destination in mind. Your mind needs the same discipline. The world will always produce noise. People will always have opinions. Life will always contain uncertainty. Peace does not come from creating a world without waves. It comes from becoming a better captain. So create boundaries around your attention. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Stop checking your phone every few minutes. Reduce content that consistently leaves you angry, insecure, or empty. Spend less time explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Give yourself periods where nobody can reach you. And most importantly, learn to ask one question before giving something your emotional energy. Does this deserve a place in my mind? Not everything deserves an answer. Not every insult deserves a reaction. Not every trend deserves your attention. Not every person's opinion deserves your self-doubt. Not every problem belongs to you. Because when you protect your attention, you are not becoming disconnected from life. You are finally taking ownership of the part of life that has always belonged to you, your mind. And the quieter your mind becomes, the easier it becomes to hear something that was buried beneath all the noise. You were never missing happiness. You were often just too distracted to notice it. Maybe happiness was never something you needed to find. Maybe it was something you needed to stop running away from. You learned to accept reality, stop comparing your journey, enjoy your own company, protect your peace, appreciate small moments, and stop making your happiness dependent on some future version of yourself. The Stoics understood that life will never give you perfect conditions. There will always be something missing, something uncertain, something you wish were different. But you can still choose how you meet the life in front of you. You can want more without believing you are not enough. You can improve yourself without hating yourself. You can walk alone without feeling empty. So stop waiting for the perfect life before allowing yourself to feel alive. Look around you. Notice what is already here. Be grateful for what you have. Work patiently for what you want, and make peace with the things you cannot control, because the person you keep trying to become deserves your effort. But the person you are today deserves your acceptance too. Be happy with yourself, not because your life is perfect, but because you finally understand that you don't need perfection to experience peace. And if this video helped you see yourself differently, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to learn how to be at peace with themselves.